The notification chime pierced the December silence at 2:17 a.m., and I knew my marriage was over. Not because of the sound itself. Elena's phone buzzed constantly with work messages, client emergencies, and the endless stream of holiday party planning that consumed her life as marketing director at Pinnacle Creative. No, it was the way she lunged for it in the darkness, her fingers scrambling across the nightstand with the desperate urgency of someone hiding something important. "Sorry, honey," she whispered, the phone's glow illuminating her face in harsh blue light. "Just work stuff. You know how crazy December gets." I lay there in our king-size bed, staring at the ceiling fan that had been making that annoying clicking sound for 3 months now. Elena kept promising to call someone to fix it, but like most of her promises lately, it remained unfulfilled. The clicking matched the rhythm of my thoughts. Click, she's lying. Click, she's definitely lying. Click, what the heck is she really doing? "Work stuff at 2 in the morning?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. After 15 years in IT security consulting, I'd learned that the best way to catch someone in a lie was to let them dig their own grave. "That's dedication." Elena's laugh sounded forced, artificial. "You know Mark. He gets these brilliant ideas at all hours and just has to share them immediately. The man never sleeps." Mark Feldman. Her boss, mentor, and according to the increasingly frequent mentions in our dinner conversations, creative genius who truly understood her vision. Mark, who had swooped in 6 months ago to acquire the small marketing firm where Elena worked, bringing his big city connections and even bigger ego. Mark, who seemed to require an awful lot of after-hours consultation with my wife. "Right," I said. "Mark." She was already typing a response, her thumbs moving quickly across the screen. In the dim light, I caught a glimpse of her expression, focused, almost excited. It was the same look she used to get when we were dating, and I'd send her those long, rambling texts about whatever book I was reading or some ridiculous client story from work. When was the last time she'd looked at a message from me like that? Elena finished typing and set the phone face down on her nightstand, but not before I noticed she'd turned off the notification sound. Interesting. Very interesting. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Of course. Just finalizing details for the Christmas party next week. You're still planning to be there, right? I know you hate these work things, but it would mean a lot to me." The Christmas party. Elena had been planning this event for months, treating it like some kind of career-defining moment. She'd rented out the back room at Meridian, the trendy restaurant downtown that charged $30 for what used to be called a hamburger. She'd hired a photographer, arranged for specialty cocktails, even had custom invitations printed on thick, expensive cardstock. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied. She rolled over and kissed my cheek, her lips barely brushing my skin. "You're the best, Luke. I don't know what I'd do without you." As she settled back into her pillow and her breathing gradually shifted into the steady rhythm of sleep, I remained wide awake, staring at that clicking fan and thinking about lies. In my line of work, I spent most of my time identifying security vulnerabilities, finding the weak spots in systems that people thought were impenetrable. The key was understanding that every system, no matter how sophisticated, had patterns. And once you identified the patterns, you could predict the failures. Elena's patterns had been shifting for months. The late nights that used to be occasional had become routine. The work trips that used to be local had started requiring overnight stays. The phone that used to sit carelessly on counters and tables was now guarded like state secrets. And then there was Mark. I'd met him exactly once, at the company acquisition celebration Elena had dragged me to in September. He was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, expensively dressed where I preferred comfortable, smooth where I tended toward awkward in social situations. He'd gripped my hand just a little too firmly during our introduction and looked just a little too long at Elena when he thought I wasn't watching. "Luke's our computer genius," Elena had said, introducing me with the kind of affectionate condescension usually reserved for pet tricks. "Ah, IT," Mark had replied, as if that explained everything about my character. "Essential work. Very technical." The conversation had moved on quickly, as conversations do when someone decides you're not worth their attention. But I'd watched Mark work the room that night, noticed how he positioned himself as the center of every story, how he managed to touch Elena's arm or shoulder during their conversations, how she laughed just a little too loudly at his jokes. I'd mentioned it to Elena on the drive home. "Your new boss seems very hands-on." "Mark's just friendly," she'd said. "He's been incredibly supportive of my ideas. Finally, someone who recognizes my potential." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That phrase, "finally someone," had stuck with me. The implication being, of course, that I had somehow failed to recognize her potential. That in our 8 years of marriage, I'd been holding her back rather than supporting her dreams. Maybe I had been. Maybe I'd gotten comfortable, complacent. Maybe I'd stopped seeing Elena as the ambitious, creative woman I'd fallen in love with and started seeing her as simply my wife, part of the furniture of our shared life. But that didn't excuse whatever was happening at 2:17 a.m. I slipped out of bed carefully, padding across the hardwood floor in my bare feet. Elena didn't stir. She'd always been a heavy sleeper, especially after her evening wine, a habit that had evolved from a single glass with dinner to 2 or 3 glasses while catching up on emails. Downstairs in our kitchen, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the island where Elena usually worked on her laptop. The granite countertop was cluttered with printed emails, fabric samples for some client project, and a stack of those expensive Christmas party invitations. I picked up one of the invitations, admiring the elegant typography and subtle gold foil accents. Elena had excellent taste. It was one of the things that had attracted me to her originally. She could walk into any space and immediately see its potential, envision how it could be transformed into something better. "Join us for an evening of celebration and connection," the invitation read, "as we toast to a successful year and the bright future ahead." Connection. Interesting word choice. My phone buzzed with a text from Harry Cole, my best friend since college and currently a private investigator after washing out of the police force due to what he diplomatically called personality conflicts with authority. "Can't sleep either? This insomnia is getting ridiculous." I typed back, "Wife's phone buzzing at 2 a.m. with work stuff. You know how it is?" The response came immediately. "No, actually I don't. Want to talk about it?" Harry had been divorced twice, both times due to what he called irreconcilable differences regarding honesty. He'd developed a sixth sense about relationship problems, probably because he'd made every mistake possible in his own marriages. "Maybe tomorrow," I replied, still processing. "Processing is good. Denial is bad. Call me if you need backup." Backup. Harry always talked like we were still planning college pranks instead of dealing with the messy realities of middle-aged life. But there was something comforting about having someone in your corner, someone who'd help you figure out what was really happening when your world started tilting sideways. I finished my coffee and headed back upstairs, pausing outside our bedroom door to listen. Elena was snoring softly, completely at peace. Whatever secrets she was keeping, they weren't costing her any sleep. Her phone was still face down on the nightstand, silent now, but somehow still radiating importance. I stood there for a long moment, weighing my options. I could grab it, check her messages, confirm my suspicions in 30 seconds of scrolling, but that would make me the kind of husband who sneaks around checking his wife's phone, the kind of husband who doesn't trust the woman he promised to love and honor, the kind of husband I'd always sworn I'd never become. Instead, I climbed back into bed and lay there listening to that clicking fan, thinking about patterns and vulnerabilities and the Christmas party that Elena was so excited to share with Mark. As I finally drifted off to sleep around 4 a.m., one thought kept circling through my mind. If Elena was planning something, she'd better be prepared for me to plan something back. After all, I was the computer genius. Technical work was my specialty, and I was very, very good at finding security vulnerabilities. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of December drizzle that makes everything look slightly depressing. Elena was already gone when I woke up. Another early meeting, according to the note she'd left propped against the coffee maker. Her handwriting was hurried, almost illegible, as if she couldn't wait to get out of the house. "Emergency client call at 7 a.m. We'll probably be late tonight. Mark wants to review the party setup. Don't wait up. Love you." The exclamation points felt forced, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. And that phrase, "don't wait up," was practically an engraved invitation to do exactly the opposite. I called Harry while I was getting dressed for work. "So," he said without preamble, "how bad is it?" "I don't know yet. Maybe I'm being paranoid." "Luke, you're the least paranoid person I know. You're the guy who actually believes it when politicians say they're working for the people. If you think something's wrong, something's probably very wrong." Harry had a point. I'd always been optimistic to a fault, the kind of person who assumed the best about people until proven otherwise. Elena used to joke that I was too trusting for my own good, that my natural inclination toward giving people the benefit of the doubt would eventually get me in trouble. Turned out she was right about that, just not in the way either of us had expected. "What kind of evidence would you need?" I asked. "Hypothetically speaking." "Hypothetically?" "Phone records, credit card statements, any changes in routine or behavior. But Luke, if you're thinking about..." "I'm not thinking about anything yet. just trying to understand what normal investigative process looks like. Harry was quiet for a moment. You want my professional opinion? Document everything. Dates, times, conversations, inconsistencies. If something's happening, there will be a pattern. There's always a pattern. That word again. Pattern. And if there's no pattern, if I'm just being a suspicious, paranoid husband, then you apologize to your wife and maybe consider couples counseling. But Luke, in my experience, wives don't get mysterious work calls at 2 a.m. unless something's going on. After hanging up, I sat in my car in our driveway for a few minutes, looking at the house Elena and I had bought 3 years ago. We'd fallen in love with it immediately, the craftsman-style architecture, the mature oak trees in the front yard, the way the morning light streamed through the kitchen windows. It was supposed to be our forever home, the place where we'd build our life together. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting to be processed. My first stop was Elena's office. Pinnacle Creative occupied a sleek, modern building in the business district, all glass and steel and architectural angles designed to convey innovation and success. Elena's car was in its usual spot in the parking lot, but I also noticed a familiar black BMW in the space marked "Reserved for M. Feldman." Mark was here early, too. How convenient. I didn't go inside. That would be too obvious, too desperate. Instead, I drove to my own office and tried to focus on actual work. I had 3 client meetings scheduled and a security audit to complete, the kind of routine tasks that usually provided a welcome distraction from whatever personal drama was cluttering up my life. But concentration proved impossible. Every few minutes, I found myself checking my phone for messages from Elena, analyzing the tone of her texts for hidden meanings, wondering what she and Mark were discussing in their early morning meeting. Around noon, I gave up pretending to work and called Harry. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Shoot. If you were going to investigate someone you were married to, what would be the ethical boundaries? What would be crossing the line? Harry sighed. Luke, there's what's legal and what's right, and those aren't always the same thing. Legally, you can monitor devices you own jointly, check records on accounts with your name on them, observe behavior in public spaces. Ethically, that's between you and your conscience. What would you do? I'd find out the truth, whatever it took. Because living with suspicion is worse than living with certainty, even when the certainty hurts. That afternoon, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. I drove back to Elena's office building and parked across the street with a clear view of the entrance and parking lot. It felt ridiculous, like some kind of amateur detective fantasy, but I needed to see something concrete. I needed to observe the patterns Harry had talked about. At 5:30, employees started trickling out of the building. I recognized a few faces from company events, Elena's colleagues, people she'd introduced me to at various work functions. They walked to their cars with the tired satisfaction of people finishing a normal workday. Elena and Mark emerged together at 6:15. They weren't touching, weren't walking unusually close together, weren't doing anything that would look suspicious to a casual observer. But there was something about their body language, the way they leaned toward each other while talking, the way Elena laughed and tossed her hair in a gesture I recognized from our early dating days. They stood by Mark's BMW for several minutes, their conversation animated and intense. Mark gestured frequently with his hands, and Elena nodded along with obvious enthusiasm. At one point, he touched her arm briefly while making some point, and she didn't pull away. Then Mark opened his car door and said something that made Elena laugh again. She walked toward her own car, but turned back twice to continue their conversation across the parking lot. The whole interaction lasted maybe 10 minutes. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that couldn't be explained as normal workplace communication between a boss and employee who were planning an important event together. But I'd been married to Elena for 8 years. I knew her expressions, her gestures, her different types of laughter. The woman I'd just watched flirting in a parking lot was not the same woman who'd been giving me distracted, obligatory kisses goodnight for the past 6 months. I followed Elena home at a distance, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. When I arrived, she was already in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine and sorting through a stack of mail. "How was your day?" I asked, settling onto one of the bar stools at our kitchen island. "Exhausting," she said, not looking up from the mail. "Mark's really pushing to make this party perfect. He has such high standards, which is great, but it means everything takes 3 times longer than it should." Sounds stressful. It is, but it's also exciting. This party could really put our team on the map. Mark has connections throughout the industry, and if we can impress his contacts... She trailed off, finally looking at me. "Sorry, I'm probably boring you with work stuff." "Not at all. Tell me about Mark's connections." Elena's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. He used to run a major campaign for a national retail chain. You know, the one with all those emotional commercials about family and tradition. He's got relationships with creative directors at agencies I've only dreamed of working with. And he thinks you have potential. He says I have a natural instinct for storytelling, that I understand how to create emotional connections with audiences. He thinks I could be running my own accounts within a year. The pride in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just about career advancement. This was about validation, recognition, someone finally seeing her the way she wanted to be seen. That's wonderful, I said, and meant it. Whatever was happening between Elena and Mark, her excitement about her career was genuine. She deserved to have her talents recognized, but recognition and late-night text messages were two different things. So, what's the timeline for the party? I asked. When do you need everything finalized? This weekend, really. Mark wants to do a final walkthrough on Sunday, make sure all the details are perfect. Elena poured herself a generous glass of wine and settled onto the stool next to me. I know I've been distracted lately, honey. This project has just consumed so much mental energy, but after next week, things will go back to normal. Normal, as if we both knew what that meant anymore. I'm proud of you, I said, taking her hand. I know how hard you've been working. She squeezed my fingers, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, hopeful, wanting to be understood. I love you, Luke. I know I haven't been the most attentive wife lately, but I love you. I love you too. We sat there holding hands in our kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable debris of our shared life, unopened mail, Elena's work papers, the coffee mug I'd left on the counter that morning. It should have been a moment of connection, of intimacy. Instead, all I could think about was the way she'd laughed in that parking lot, and the text message that had arrived at 2:17 a.m., and the growing certainty that whatever Elena was telling herself about Mark and validation and career opportunities, the truth was much more complicated. That night, after Elena fell asleep, I made another decision that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. I was going to find out exactly what was happening at those late-night meetings. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp December morning that makes everything look like a Christmas card. Elena was up before dawn, buzzing around the house with nervous energy, checking and rechecking her lists for the party that was now just 5 days away. I think I'm forgetting something important, she said, standing in our kitchen with her laptop open, surrounded by fabric samples, menu printouts, and her ever-present notebook filled with party details. There's always something you don't think about until the last minute. Like what? I asked, genuinely curious about the complexity of planning a work event. Dietary restrictions, seating arrangements that don't put enemies next to each other, making sure the music isn't too loud for conversation but isn't so quiet that awkward silences become obvious. She trailed off, staring at her screen. Mark just sent me 3 more names to add to the guest list. 3 more? How many people are coming to this thing? 47 now. Mark knows a lot of people in the industry. Elena's phone buzzed with a text, and she grabbed it immediately. He wants to meet at the restaurant in an hour to do the final walkthrough. Want to come with us? The invitation surprised me. For months, Elena had been protective of her work time with Mark, always having reasons why I couldn't join them for meetings or client dinners. Now she was volunteering to include me in their planning session. Sure, I said. I'd like to see what you've been working on. Elena's smile seemed genuinely pleased. Great. You can help us figure out the logistics. You're good at seeing potential problems before they happen. An hour later, we were standing in the back room at Meridian, watching Mark gesture expansively while describing his vision for the evening's flow. He'd arrived before us and was already deep in conversation with the restaurant manager when we walked in. Luke, he said, extending his hand with that same firm grip I remembered from our first meeting. Elena tells me you're going to help us troubleshoot the setup. Excellent. Fresh eyes are always valuable. The room looked impressive, I had to admit. Elena had chosen a sophisticated color scheme of deep blues and silver, with tasteful lighting that would make everyone look good in photos. The bar was positioned to encourage mingling, and the seating areas were arranged to facilitate conversation without feeling too formal. This is beautiful, I told Elena, and meant it. You have a real talent for this. She beamed, and Mark nodded approvingly. Elena has exceptional instincts for creating atmosphere. She understands that successful events are about more than just logistics. They're about crafting experiences that people remember. For the next hour, we walked through every detail of the party setup. Mark was clearly in charge, making decisions and adjustments with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the final authority. But he consistently asked for Elena's input, and when she made suggestions, he listened carefully and often incorporated her ideas. It was actually impressive to watch them work together. They had developed an easy professional rhythm, finishing each other's thoughts and building on each other's concepts. Elena was more animated and confident than I'd seen her in months, but there were moments, brief, subtle moments, when their collaboration felt like something more than professional partnership. The way Mark's hand lingered on Elena's shoulder when he was pointing out details, the way Elena's laugh became slightly breathless when Mark complimented her ideas, the way they stood just a little closer together than necessary when reviewing the seating chart. "What do you think, Luke?" Mark asked, pulling me back into the conversation. "From a logistics perspective, do you see any potential bottlenecks?" I studied the room layout, trying to focus on practical concerns rather than the undercurrent of tension I was sensing. The coat check might be an issue if everyone arrives at once, and you might want to designate someone to handle the music. Sometimes restaurant staff don't pay attention to volume levels as the night progresses. "Excellent points," Mark said. "Elena, can you coordinate with the manager about the coat situation?" "Already on it," Elena replied, making notes in her ever-present notebook. As we prepared to leave, Mark pulled Elena aside for what he called a quick final detail. I waited by the restaurant entrance, watching them through the glass doors of the private room. Their conversation was animated, with Mark gesturing frequently and Elena nodding along. At one point, he said something that made her laugh and cover her face with her hands in apparent embarrassment. When Elena rejoined me, her cheeks were slightly flushed. "Everything okay?" I asked. Mark was just giving me a pep talk about the party. He says I should be proud of what I've accomplished. She paused. "He's been such an incredible mentor, Luke. I don't think I've ever had someone believe in my potential the way he does." That phrase again, believe in my potential. The implication being that others, myself included, had somehow failed to recognize her talents. "I've always believed in your potential," I said quietly. Elena looked at me with something that might have been guilt or pity. "I know you have, honey. But Mark understands the industry in a way that, well, it's different when someone who's actually accomplished what you want to accomplish tells you that you can do it too." We drove home in relative silence, Elena absorbed in her phone and me absorbed in my thoughts. The party planning session had been illuminating, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of catching Elena and Mark in some obvious inappropriate behavior, I'd watched two people who genuinely worked well together and shared professional excitement about a project they'd collaborated on, which made the 2 a.m. text messages and secretive phone calls even more confusing. That evening, while Elena was upstairs taking a bath, I made a decision that crossed a line I'd never thought I'd cross. I opened her laptop, which she'd left on the kitchen counter, and began scrolling through her recent emails. Most of the messages were exactly what you'd expect: client communications, vendor confirmations for the party, scheduling emails with colleagues. But buried in her sent folder, I found a draft message that made my stomach drop. "Mark, I keep thinking about our conversation yesterday. You're right that some opportunities require taking risks, even when the timing isn't perfect. I've spent so long playing it safe, being the responsible one, that I've forgotten what it feels like to want something just for myself. Thank you for reminding me that I deserve to pursue what makes me happy, regardless of other people's expectations. See you tomorrow. E." The message was dated 3 days ago, but had never been sent. I read it twice, then 3 times, trying to parse the language for hidden meanings. Taking risks. Pursuing what makes me happy. Regardless of other people's expectations. Other people, like her husband, presumably. I closed the laptop and sat there in our kitchen, listening to the sound of Elena moving around upstairs, running water, humming softly to herself. She sounded happy, content, completely at peace. Meanwhile, I felt like I was drowning. My phone buzzed with a text from Harry. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Found something, not sure what it means yet. Want to talk about it? Tomorrow, still processing." "Processing is good," Harry replied, "but don't process so long that you miss what's right in front of you." What was right in front of me? A wife who was excited about her career, grateful for a mentor who recognized her talents, and maybe, probably, developing feelings that went beyond professional admiration. The question was, what was I going to do about it? As Elena came downstairs in her bathrobe, hair damp from her bath, looking relaxed and beautiful, I realized I already knew the answer. I was going to find out exactly what was happening between my wife and her mentor, and then I was going to decide whether my marriage was worth fighting for. The Christmas party was in 5 days. If Elena was planning to make some kind of move, some kind of declaration, it would probably happen then. In front of Mark's industry contacts, surrounded by colleagues and celebration, with just enough alcohol and excitement to make risky decisions feel justified, 5 days to figure out what I was really dealing with, 5 days to decide what kind of husband I was going to be. The night of the Christmas party arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the weather itself was conspiring to make the evening feel special. Elena had been getting ready for 2 hours, trying on 3 different dresses before settling on a midnight blue number that made her look stunning and confident. "You look incredible," I told her as she checked her reflection one final time. "Thank you." She smiled, but it was the distracted smile of someone whose mind was already at the party. "I'm nervous. This feels like such a big night." "It'll be perfect. You've planned every detail." "I know, but still." She trailed off, then looked at me directly. "Luke, I want you to know how much it means to me that you're supporting this. I know work parties aren't your favorite thing." "Hey, free food in an open bar. What's not to like?" Elena laughed, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married, excited, hopeful, ready to take on the world. We arrived at Meridian fashionably late, and the party was already in full swing. The back room looked even better than it had during our walkthrough, filled with well-dressed people holding cocktails and engaging in the kind of animated conversation that happens when professionals are networking while pretending to socialize. Mark was holding court near the bar, surrounded by a group of people who were hanging on his every word. He looked perfectly at home, the kind of man who thrived in social situations and knew exactly how to work a room. "Elena," he called out when he spotted us. "You made it. And Luke, good to see you again." Mark's handshake was as firm as ever, but this time I paid attention to the way he looked at Elena, the brief moment when his eyes traveled from her face down to her dress and back up again, the way his smile became slightly more intimate when he spoke to her. "The room looks fantastic," Elena said. "I think we pulled it off." "We absolutely pulled it off," Mark replied, emphasizing the "we" in a way that made it clear he considered Elena his partner in this success. "Come on, let me introduce you to some people." For the next hour, I watched Mark guide Elena through the room, introducing her to contacts and colleagues with obvious pride. He positioned her as his creative collaborator, highlighting her contributions to various projects and making sure everyone understood that she was someone worth knowing. It was actually generous of him, I had to admit. A lot of bosses would have taken full credit for the party's success, but Mark consistently shared the spotlight with Elena and made sure her talents were recognized. But there were other moments, smaller gestures that probably went unnoticed by everyone else, but felt significant to me. The way Mark's hand found the small of Elena's back when he was guiding her through the crowd. The way he leaned close to whisper comments in her ear during conversations. The way Elena's posture changed when he was near her. More confident, more animated, more alive. "Luke, right?" I turned to find a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and a friendly smile. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Christina Walsh," she said, extending her hand. "I work with Elena. We've met a couple times at company events." "Right, of course. How are you enjoying the party?" "It's incredible. Elena really outdid herself with the planning." Christina glanced around the room, then back at me with a slightly conspiratorial expression. "She and Mark make quite a team, don't they?" Something in her tone made me pay closer attention. "They seem to work well together." "Oh, they definitely do. Elena's been so much happier since Mark took over the company. It's like she finally found someone who really gets her vision, you know?" Christina took a sip of her cocktail, then continued. "I have to say, I was a little worried about Elena when Mark first arrived. He has quite a reputation as a ladies' man. Divorced twice, always dating someone new, but he's been completely professional with everyone at the office." "That's good to hear." "Well, mostly professional." Christina's laugh had an edge to it. "I mean, Elena's been putting in some serious hours on this party. Lots of late nights, weekend meetings. But that's just Elena. When she commits to a project, she gives it everything." I was starting to understand why Christina had approached me. She was fishing for information, trying to gauge whether I was aware of whatever she thought she'd observed between Elena and Mark. "Elena's always been dedicated to her work," I said carefully. "Absolutely. And Mark clearly appreciates that dedication. He's been singing her praises to everyone who'll listen." Christina paused, studying my face. "You must be so proud of her." "I am." "Good. Because Elena deserves someone who recognizes how special she is." The implication was clear. Christina thought Elena wasn't getting the recognition she deserved at home, and Mark was filling that gap. Before I could respond, Elena appeared at my side, slightly breathless and glowing with excitement. "Luke, I've been looking for you. Mark wants to make a toast, and he asked me to say a few words too." She grabbed my hand, her palm slightly damp with nervous perspiration. "Will you be okay on your own for a few more minutes?" "Of course. Go do your thing." Elena kissed my cheek quickly, then hurried back toward the front of the room where Mark was tapping a knife against his glass to get everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark began, his voice carrying easily across the room, thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate what has been an extraordinary year for Pinnacle Creative. The crowd settled into attentive silence, drinks in hand, faces turned toward Mark with the kind of respectful attention that successful people command. When I acquired this company 6 months ago, Mark continued, I knew I was getting a talented team, but I had no idea I was also getting a creative visionary who would help take our work to the next level. He turned toward Elena, who was standing beside him with a mixture of pride and nervousness on her face. Elena Hartman has been the driving force behind some of our most successful campaigns this year. Her instinct for storytelling, her understanding of what makes people connect emotionally with brands, her tireless dedication to excellence, these qualities have made her indispensable to our success. The crowd applauded, and Elena's smile became radiant. This was the moment she'd been working toward for months. Public recognition of her talents from someone whose opinion mattered in the industry. So, please join me in raising a glass to Elena and to the bright future we're building together at Pinnacle Creative. To Elena, the crowd chorused, raising their glasses. Elena stepped forward to respond, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting to see what she would say in this moment of triumph. Thank you, Mark, for your incredibly generous words, she began, her voice steady despite her obvious emotion. 6 months ago, I was just another marketing coordinator with big dreams and no clear path forward. Mark didn't just give me opportunities. He gave me permission to believe in myself. She paused, looking around the room at the faces of colleagues and industry contacts who were now seeing her as Mark's chosen protege. This party represents more than just a successful year. It represents the power of finding someone who sees your potential and challenges you to live up to it. Mark, thank you for being that person for me. The applause was enthusiastic, and Mark stepped forward to give Elena a congratulatory hug that lasted just a moment longer than strictly professional. As the crowd began to disperse and conversations resumed, I stood there processing what I'd just witnessed. Elena's speech had been heartfelt and appropriate, but the subtext was impossible to ignore. She was publicly crediting Mark with transforming her life, with giving her something she'd been missing, and the way she'd looked at him during that hug suggested her gratitude went deeper than professional appreciation. Quite a speech, Christina said, appearing beside me again. Elena's really found her voice, hasn't she? She has. Mark's been good for her. Really good. Christina's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes were watching my face intently. I hope she knows how lucky she is to have found someone who believes in her so completely. Someone. Not Mark specifically, but someone. The implication being that Elena had been lacking that kind of support and validation elsewhere in her life. The party continued around us, but I felt like I was watching it from a distance, observing the social dynamics and undercurrents while trying to figure out what was really happening between my wife and her mentor. One thing was becoming clear. Whatever Elena was feeling for Mark, it was more than professional admiration, and based on the way he was treating her, the lingering touches, the intimate conversations, the public praise, those feelings might very well be mutual. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The party reached its peak around 10 p.m., with conversations flowing as smoothly as the premium wine Elena had selected. I'd been nursing the same drink for an hour, preferring to stay alert and observant, while everyone else relaxed into the evening's festivities. Mark had been working the room like a politician, making sure to spend time with every important guest, while somehow always circling back to Elena's side. She was glowing with the success of the evening, accepting compliments on the party's organization and engaging in the kind of industry talk that clearly energized her. But I'd also noticed the meaningful glances, the whispered asides, the way Mark's hand seemed to find Elena's arm or shoulder with increasing frequency as the evening progressed and the alcohol flowed. Around 10:30, I watched Mark lean close to Elena's ear and say something that made her nod and glance toward the restaurant's main dining room. They were planning something, coordinating some kind of next move. Elena looks happy, Christina said, materializing beside me once again. She'd been circulating through the party, but I'd noticed she kept checking back with me, as if monitoring my reactions to the evening's developments. She should be. The party's a huge success. And Mark seems very appreciative of her efforts. I turned to look at Christina directly. You seem to have a lot of observations about Mark and Elena. Christina shrugged, but her expression was calculating. I notice things. It's part of my job in marketing. Reading people, understanding motivations, seeing what's really going on beneath the surface. And what do you think is going on beneath the surface? I think Elena's been feeling undervalued for a long time, and Mark makes her feel important, special, like she matters. Christina paused. The question is whether that appreciation is purely professional. Before I could respond, Elena appeared at my side, her cheeks flushed with excitement and wine. "Luke, honey, Mark wants to show a few of us the new campaign materials he's been working on. They're up in his office. It'll just take a few minutes." "His office? Now?" I know it seems weird, but Mark gets inspired by successful events like this. He wants to share some ideas while the creative energy is flowing. Elena's enthusiasm was genuine, but there was something else in her expression, a hint of anticipation that had nothing to do with marketing campaigns. "Who else is going?" Elena glanced around the room, then back at me. "Well, it depends on who's interested. Mark specifically asked me to come because he wants my input on the storytelling approach." "Just you?" "And anyone else who wants to see the materials." But even as she said it, Elena's eyes were searching the room for Mark, not for other potential participants in this impromptu creative session. I spotted Mark near the bar, saying goodbye to some guests while keeping one eye on Elena. When he caught her looking at him, he smiled and nodded toward the exit. "You know what?" I said. "I'd love to see what Mark's been working on. Mind if I tag along?" Elena's smile faltered slightly. "Of course not. It might be kind of boring for you, technical marketing stuff. I'm interested in your work. I'd like to understand more about what you've been so excited about." For a moment, Elena looked genuinely conflicted. Then Mark appeared beside us, his smile warm and inclusive. "Luke, Elena mentioned you might want to see some of the new campaign concepts. Fantastic. I always value fresh perspectives, especially from someone outside the industry." "Lead the way," I said. Mark's office was on the third floor of the same building as Pinnacle Creative, accessible through a private elevator that required a key card. The space was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture, walls covered with awards and campaign materials from his previous agency. "Can I offer anyone a drink?" Mark asked, moving toward a well-stocked bar cart in the corner. "I have some excellent scotch." "I'm good," I said. "Elena?" "Maybe just a small one. It's been such an incredible night." Mark poured Elena a generous glass of what looked like expensive whiskey, then fixed himself an even larger one. He was more affected by the evening's alcohol than I'd realized. His movements slightly looser, his usual careful composure relaxed. "So," he said, settling into one of the leather chairs and gesturing for us to join him, "the campaign I wanted to show you is for a luxury hotel chain. The concept is about transformation, how travel changes people, opens them up to new experiences, new versions of themselves." He pulled out a tablet and began showing us mock-ups and storyboards. The work was genuinely impressive, sophisticated, emotionally resonant, the kind of high-end creative that Elena had always aspired to produce. "Elena's been helping me refine the emotional arc," Mark continued. "She has an instinct for understanding what people really want, what they're missing in their lives." "It's beautiful work," I said, and meant it. Elena's contributions have been invaluable. She understands that people don't just buy products, they buy the promise of becoming who they want to be. Mark was looking at Elena as he spoke, and she was looking back with obvious admiration. The subtext was getting thicker by the minute. "The tagline we've developed is, 'Discover who you're meant to be,'" Elena said. "It's about giving yourself permission to want more, to pursue experiences that transform you." "Even when those experiences might complicate other aspects of your life?" I asked. Elena and Mark exchanged a quick glance. "Growth always involves some level of risk," Mark said carefully. "The question is whether you're willing to accept that risk in pursuit of something meaningful." "And what if pursuing what you want hurts other people?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Mark's expression remained neutral, but Elena looked uncomfortable. "I think," Mark said finally, "that we all have to make choices about what kind of life we want to live. Sometimes those choices are difficult, but living authentically is worth the temporary discomfort." "Temporary discomfort. Interesting way to put it." Elena stood up abruptly. "I should probably get back to the party. People might be wondering where we went." "Actually," Mark said, not moving from his chair, "I think most people have headed home by now. It's after 11. Still, I should check." "Elena." Mark's voice was gentle but firm. "Sit down. Please." She sat, but on the edge of her chair, clearly uncomfortable with the tension that had developed in the room. Mark leaned forward, his attention focused entirely on Elena. "I want to say something, and I want Luke to hear it too, because I respect your marriage and I don't want there to be any misunderstandings." Here it comes, I thought. "Elena, you are an extraordinarily talented woman. Working with you these past 6 months has been one of the highlights of my career. You're creative, dedicated, and you have a natural understanding of what makes people connect emotionally with stories." Elena was staring at her hands, her face flushed. But more than that, Mark continued, you're someone who deserves to be appreciated for who you are, not just what you can do for other people. You deserve to have someone see your potential and encourage you to pursue it, even when that pursuit requires making difficult choices. Mark, Elena said quietly, maybe we shouldn't. I'm not finished. Mark's voice was still gentle, but there was an edge of determination now. Luke, your wife is remarkable. I hope you know that. I hope you tell her that. Because if you don't, someone else will. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. I looked at Elena, who was still staring at her hands, and then at Mark, who was watching me with the confident expression of someone who believed he held all the cards. You're right, I said finally. Elena is remarkable. She's creative and talented and deserves to have her work recognized. Mark nodded approvingly. But, I continued, she's also my wife, and if you think I'm going to sit here and listen to you tell me how to appreciate her while you're obviously trying to seduce her, you're mistaken. Elena's head snapped up. Luke. No, Elena. Let's be honest about what's happening here. Mark isn't interested in just your creative talents, and you know it. Mark's expression hardened. I think you're misinterpreting. Am I? The late-night text messages, the private meetings, the way you've been touching her all evening? What exactly am I misinterpreting? Elena stood up again, her face pale. Luke, you're embarrassing yourself. Mark has been nothing but professional. Professional? Elena, listen to yourself. You just spent the entire evening looking at him like he hung the moon, and now you're sitting in his office at midnight drinking whiskey while he tells you that you deserve someone who appreciates you properly. Because I do deserve that. Elena's voice was louder now, her composure finally cracking. I deserve to work with someone who sees my potential, who challenges me to be better, who doesn't just see me as a wife who happens to have a job. Is that what you think I see you as? I think you see me as part of the furniture, Luke. Part of the comfortable life you've built where everything stays the same and no one takes any risks or pursues anything that might be complicated or difficult. The truth was finally coming out. And Mark sees you differently? Elena glanced at Mark, who was watching our argument with obvious discomfort, but making no move to intervene. Mark sees me as someone with unlimited potential, someone worth investing in, worth believing in. Worth pursuing? Worth everything. There it was. The admission I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. Mark finally spoke up. Luke, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said, standing up. You want my wife, and she wants you to want her. The only question is what you're both planning to do about it. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Luke, it's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple. You're either committed to our marriage or you're not. You either want to work on whatever problems we have, or you want to pursue this thing with Mark. I want to be happy, Elena said quietly. I want to feel valued and excited and alive. I want to work with someone who sees my potential and helps me achieve it. And you can't have that with me? Elena looked at me for a long moment, and I saw 8 years of marriage in her expression. The good times and the routine times and the times when we'd both settled for comfortable rather than pushing for extraordinary. I don't know, she said finally. I honestly don't know. Mark cleared his throat. Perhaps this conversation should continue at home, between the two of you. Perhaps, I said, you should stay out of my marriage. Your marriage, Mark replied, his composure returning, seems to be something Elena has questions about. I looked at Elena, who was crying silently, and then at Mark, who was sitting in his expensive chair in his impressive office, confident that he was offering Elena something better than what she had at home. Maybe he was right. Maybe Elena did deserve someone who was more excited about her career, more supportive of her ambitions, more willing to take risks and pursue complicated dreams. But she was still my wife, and I wasn't ready to give up on us without a fight. Elena, I said, we're going home, now. She nodded, wiping her eyes, and stood up. Mark didn't try to stop us, but as we reached the door, he called out, Elena, think about what you really want. You deserve to be happy. In the elevator down to the parking garage, Elena and I stood in silence, both of us processing what had just happened. The evening that was supposed to be Elena's professional triumph had turned into a confrontation about the future of our marriage. Luke, Elena said as we reached our car, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get so complicated. But they are complicated. Yes, they are. We drove home through the quiet streets, both of us lost in thought. The Christmas party was over, but the real conversation, the one that would determine whether our marriage survived, was just beginning. We didn't speak during the 20-minute drive home. Elena stared out the passenger window at the empty streets, while I focused on the road and tried to process everything that had just happened. The silence felt heavy with unspoken questions and uncomfortable truths. Our house looked exactly the same as when we'd left it 4 hours earlier, but somehow it felt different now, like a stage set for a play we were no longer sure we wanted to perform. Elena headed straight for the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, her hands shaking slightly as she raised it to her lips. I sat down at the island where she usually worked on her laptop, the same spot where I'd discovered that unsent email draft just a few days earlier. "So," I said finally, "what happens now?" Elena set down her glass and turned to face me. Her makeup was slightly smudged from crying, and she looked exhausted. "I don't know, Luke. I honestly don't know. Do you love him?" The question hung between us like a challenge. Elena's face crumpled slightly, and she covered her eyes with her hands. "I don't know that either. I know I feel more alive when I'm working with him than I have in years. I know he makes me feel like I'm capable of extraordinary things. I know he sees me in a way that makes me feel valuable and important and desired. And I don't make you feel those things?" Elena looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Luke, when was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you seemed genuinely excited about something I was working on? When was the last time we had a conversation about dreams or goals or anything more significant than grocery lists and weekend plans?" The questions hit harder than I'd expected because I couldn't immediately answer them. When had I stopped telling Elena she was beautiful? When had I stopped asking about her work beyond polite, surface-level inquiries? When had we stopped talking about the future and started just managing the present? "I thought we were comfortable," I said. "I thought we had built something stable and good." "Comfortable isn't enough anymore, Luke. Stable isn't enough. I want to feel passionate about my life, excited about what I'm building, proud of what I'm accomplishing." "And you can't feel those things with me?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I don't know if the problem is you specifically or if it's us together. Maybe we've just fallen into patterns that don't work anymore. Maybe we've stopped challenging each other, stopped pushing each other to grow." "Or maybe," I said, "you've just found someone new and exciting, and you're confusing novelty with compatibility." Elena's expression hardened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? 6 months ago you were happy with our life. You complained sometimes about work, but you seemed content with us. Then Mark shows up, starts paying attention to you, starts telling you how talented and special you are, and suddenly our 8-year marriage isn't enough? It's not that simple. Then explain it to me. Help me understand what changed." Elena sat down across from me, her expression thoughtful. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "Do you remember when we first started dating? How we used to stay up all night talking about books and ideas and what we wanted to do with our lives? How excited we were about building something together?" I did remember. Those early conversations had been intoxicating, the sense of finding someone who understood my thoughts, who challenged my assumptions, who made me want to be better than I was. When did we stop having those conversations, Luke? When did we stop being curious about each other's inner lives? "I don't know. Life got busy, work got demanding. We settled into routines." "Exactly. We settled. And settling felt okay when I thought it was just part of growing up, part of building a stable adult life. But then Mark came along, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to have someone be genuinely interested in my thoughts, my ideas, my potential. So this is about intellectual connection." Elena hesitated. "It started that way. Mark would ask me questions about campaigns, really listen to my answers, build on my ideas in ways that made them better. He treated me like a creative partner, not just someone who executed other people's visions. And then it became something more? And then, yes, it became something more. Not physically," she added quickly. "We've never crossed that line. But emotionally, yes. I started looking forward to our meetings in ways that had nothing to do with work. I started thinking about him when I was at home. I started comparing the way he made me feel to the way I felt in our marriage. The honesty was brutal, but somehow also a relief. At least now I knew what I was dealing with." "So what do you want, Elena? Do you want to end our marriage and see what happens with Mark?" "I want to feel excited about my life again. I want to feel like I'm growing, like I'm becoming the person I'm supposed to be." "That's not an answer to my question." Elena looked at me for a long moment, and I saw 8 years of shared history in her expression. The good memories and the disappointments, the dreams we'd built together and the ways we'd both compromised those dreams in the name of practicality. "I want to try," she said finally. "I want to try to figure out if we can find our way back to the people we were when we fell in love with each other. But Luke, I need you to understand that I can't go back to the way things were. I can't pretend I haven't realized how much I was missing. What does that mean, practically? It means we need to start talking to each other again. Really talking about things that matter. It means you need to be genuinely interested in my work, not just politely supportive. It means we both need to start taking risks, pursuing growth, even when it's uncomfortable. And Mark? Elena's face tightened. Mark is my boss. I have to work with him. That's not what I'm asking, and you know it. I don't know, Luke. I don't know if I can just turn off whatever I'm feeling for him. But I'm willing to try, if you're willing to try too. It wasn't the decisive rejection of Mark that I'd hoped for, but it was something. An acknowledgement that our marriage was worth fighting for, even if the fight was going to be complicated and difficult. What would trying look like? Counseling, maybe. Real conversations about what we both want from life. Time together that isn't just routine maintenance of our relationship. And if we try and it doesn't work? Elena's eyes filled with tears again. Then at least we'll know we gave it everything we had. I sat there looking at my wife, really looking at her for the first time in months, and saw someone who was struggling to figure out what she wanted from life, someone who had been feeling invisible and undervalued, someone who deserved better than the comfortable complacency our marriage had become. I also saw someone who had been emotionally unfaithful, who had allowed another man to become the primary source of validation and excitement in her life, who had been prepared to throw away 8 years of marriage for the promise of something more stimulating. Both things were true. Elena was both the victim of our mutual complacency and the architect of our current crisis. Okay, I said finally. We'll try. Really? Really. But Elena, I need you to understand something. If we're going to work on this marriage, you need to be all in. You can't keep 1 foot in our relationship and 1 foot in whatever fantasy you've built around Mark. I understand. Do you? Because tonight in his office you looked at him like he was offering you salvation, and you looked at me like I was the obstacle to your happiness? Elena winced. I'm sorry. I know I handled it badly. Tonight was a revelation, for both of us. Now we know where we stand. And where do we stand? I looked around our kitchen, at the evidence of our shared life, the coffee maker we'd bought together, the photos on the refrigerator, the comfortable clutter of 2 people who had built something real and imperfect together. We stand at the beginning, I said. The beginning of figuring out whether we can build something better than what we had, or whether we're just too different now to make it work. Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. The beginning sounds scary. Yeah, but maybe scary is better than comfortable. Outside, it had started to rain again, the kind of steady December drizzle that makes everything look gray and uncertain. But inside our kitchen, for the first time in months, Elena and I were actually talking to each other, not managing logistics or exchanging pleasantries, but having the kind of honest, difficult conversation that might actually lead somewhere. It wasn't the ending I'd hoped for when this whole crisis began, but it wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. And maybe, after 8 years of comfortable routine, a beginning was exactly what we needed. The Christmas party was over, the confrontation was finished, the real work of saving our marriage, or figuring out that it couldn't be saved, was just getting started. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like Elena and I were on the same side, facing the same challenge together. It was a start.